let's talk credibility. And if you watch to the end, I'll give my credibility if you want. But I would rather not start with that because here's the reason why. You should not think that credibility is something that you go to school necessarily to get a degree for. Yes, you could say that in the sense that you'd be officially recognized. And I agree with going to school. You should go to school and you should learn all you can. But when it comes to arguments, that's not the end all. In fact, it might even be just the beginning. So, there have been several videos that people have posted here on the app uh, about pseudo-intellectualism. A lot of it went back down to someone who pretends to have credibility that they do not, or people who are trying to make money off of you. Well, here's the thing. One, intellectual resources do cost money. And so if someone is teaching you, like let's say you go to a college and you have a professor, that person needs to eat. And that person needs to uh, be able to have a place to live. And that person needs to have a um, ability to research more so they can keep sharp. Okay, now, credibility in the other sense of these claims on pseudo intellectualism. So, someone who has a false degree, yes, or someone who claims to have a degree when they don't. Yes, I would have to agree that in most cases, people who are shady about their credibility are not, are probably trying to sell you something. They're probably not interested in a honest discussion. But here's the thing: when you add a degree in it, people would say, "Oh, he's an expert." Then they would not think for themselves, and that's the problem here. So when you're looking at someone who's making a claim, credibility, is it really within their degree? Yes or no? So let's talk about a degree. Someone goes to school for however many years, they get a degree. Naturally, good job. But why is the degree impressive? The degree is impressive because of hard work and a lot of information that they have taken in. Now, what someone wishes to do with that degree, that's on them. Um, they could go back and get some more degrees. They could go work in the field that they've chosen. They could become a researcher. They could do whatever they want. They could make a YouTube channel. Of course, by the way, I'm not a expert in psychology. I'm not an expert in MBTI, but I do read a lot of MBTI and psychology. In fact, a lot of the thinkers that are close to my area of interest, neo-Aristotelianism, pragmatism, and so on, are basically figures that are very well acquainted with psychology. In fact, even some of the guys I just read casually, like Slavoj Zizek, he's a psychoanalyst and a philosopher. So, like, my field of study is close to psychology, but that doesn't make me an expert in psychology. That does not make me a MBTI expert. In fact, I don't even have credibility. I cannot say that I have a certificate from the MBTI official or KRC or whatever. Uh, I've already done the research that costs a lot of money, and I have more ambitions in philosophy than psychology, so no way is that going to be good enough. Plus, I don't think they make a lot of money anyway in typology. I mean, like, so spending like thousands and thousands of dollars to only make what about 50 to 150 whatever dollars a session. Yeah, no thanks. I'll leave it to people who do that on top of something else, like psychology or whatever. But that's not me. I'm more of a humanities guy, and if I could edit, I'd put that video of Saul Goodman saying, "I'm more of a humanities guy," because that's funny. But jokes aside, let's get back to it. So, what makes something credible? I would have to say not necessarily the degree, because people could have a degree and they could misuse it, or they could forget about all the information that they had studied. So, what next? Well, this is where we go to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle is not the only thinker on this perspective. There's several others you could consult, but since I'm and basically someone who has written a thesis on Aristotle, I can credibly talk about this. So, credibility is endoxa. Endoxa is the Greek word for reputable opinion. Now, when you have a reputable opinion, that does not make it a true opinion. It just means that it's readily believable. Just like when you hear a doctor say something about, these are how you get healthier, you might believe that this is a good path. Now, it's not a certain path. It depends on a lot of factors. Maybe you're not the body type needed for that, or maybe your body needs different nutrition, whatever. But that does not mean that this opinion is invalid. In fact, it seems reasonable. It comes from a doctor, right? Well, with reputable opinions, you might take we'll take to the example of the doctor. We'll say, like, a doctor said, X is Y. Okay, so it probably is true that X is Y, and it's probably true from this other perspective that Y is B. So you can attach your ignorance to these statements. Then you say, well, this is probably true. So, and if this is true, I can infer this as well. And then, if that inference is true, then I can infer a conclusion. That is basically abductive reasoning. I am predicting a hypothesis. I'm forming a theory and a conclusion. But this is all contingent on this being true. It's an inference to credibility. It's basically where I can say something, but it's not quite clear that it's true, but it's clear that it is reasonable that you can believe it. There's some force to it. And so, what you do with this is you put it against other theories. And as you put it against other theories, you use what's called dialectic. You have these theories clash together, gathering in the meanwhile. By the way, in my thesis that I had written, I had talked about this. It's on the function of abductive reasoning and Aristotelian argumentation. So I'm just gonna, for the rest of this video, I'm basically distilling it down. I'm not giving you in my stuff like my arguments for this method, but this is just a method that I had researched, and I think it's very helpful. So basically, as you are doing a dialectic, your evidence is gathered from what you had priorly understood, what you had known before. This other theory is bringing in information, some good evidence. So right here you have what's called induction going on. Taking this particular, is this true, is this true, is this true, is this true, is this true? You come up with a general idea. And when you have this general idea, you can say, attached to some type of universal. And now when you have this universal attached, that's when you can find a cause. Hopefully mutually exclusive cause. And then what you do from there is you use a classic syllogism, which would take this universal, this middle, conclude to what is necessary. Now, when you have this type of reasoning, of course, when you're first starting out with abductive reasoning, you do not have access to science. In fact, your scientific opinion, in the sense of Aristotle, is one that is necessary. It's one that is universal, that you know the elements and the principles and so on. But when you're just starting with a intellectual research, when you're just first starting with an investigation, you don't know any of that. All you know is that what you had known prior, if anything. And if you don't know anything prior, you might want to trust some type of credible source. Now, credibility in Aristotle is readily believable to the wise, the many, the most illustrious, and so on. But, like I said, that doesn't mean it's quite true. And that's why you have this dialectic, which is full of induction going on, which would give you the evidence you need to say from the deduction the necessary. So I will do a more in-depth video on this in the future, but I think a pseudo-intellectual would be someone who would skirt all of this. Yes, if you have a lot of credibility, if you are a doctor, if you have a master's degree or a PhD, of course, here in America, master's degrees are not doctors, but PhDs are. But so if you have credibility at all, you could get away with saying from the deduction and go down to the necessary, the particular necessary conclusion. But that's not kind to people who do not know. John of Salisbury talks about how we respond to the illiterate, as well as Aristotle has talked about this, and others in the ancient world, in the medieval world. You do not use deduction. They do not know. So you provide the evidence. So if you're an expert, maybe not using the appeal to credibility, appeal to authority, but you can say, this is the case, this is the case, this is the case. There's a mutually exclusive, there's a mutual cause between all this, and this is why I believe what I believe. If you are not an expert, be honest about it, but bring in the opinions maybe of those who are expertly, but think for yourself. Get the dialectic going. Get the evidence. Then bring in your dialectic as you're doing it. And then bring in the demonstration. Bring in the universal that you can possibly find from all that research, and then bring in the middle term and the conclusion. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. By the way, I got a master's degree in philosophy, and that's my credibility. I am not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in MBTI, but my opinions are still valuable because, for one, philosophy and psychology are close. Two, I have read a lot. I've read a lot of Kierkegaard. I've read Carl Jung. I love Carl Jung. He's wonderful. He's phenomenal. I've read William James, John Dewey. I've read Albert Ellis, Dr. Jerome Kagan, Galen, and so many others. But then again, I'm just like anyone else. You follow the evidence. You follow reason. And that's how you establish credibility. That's how you establish whether or not something is true. you don't have to use my method I showed before, using inductive reasoning, then dialectic/induction, then conclusion. But that's how I do it, and that's how I think if I were to teach someone how to reason and do investigation, that's how I would teach them to do it. But there are several ways. See you in the next video. I'm excited.